So let's do this. Always wanted to be like St. Francis, preaching to squirrels and trees and stuff like that. Welcome to Open Way. My name's Mark Fox. My task is to introduce the second of our two chats on shared practices that we're going to focus on in this year, 2020. Last time Beth talked of the practice of reconciliation, and this time it's unlikely friendships. And at Open Way, just a little backstop on our idea of belonging or membership is that take a year at a time and we decide to experiment with shared practices. And the two we're focusing on is unlikely friendships and reconciliation. So that's my job this time. But this time, let's acknowledge, is framed by, well, the novel coronavirus and COVID-19. This time is underlined by all these amazing unlikely friendships we're having with millions around the world who are immersed into this world of social distancing, self-isolation, hoarding. Hey, does anyone have an extra roll of toilet paper? Just saying. And that surreal sense, that's my word, it's surreal, that we're participating in something weird and potentially deadly for the very first time. Just coming here, I ran into a neighbor I haven't seen for a long time, and she said, "My, they're talking about we wouldn't be able to go outside." So I thought, let's just be outside while we can. We're sort of participating in this uncalled for part we have in this movie script that's playing that we want nothing really to do with. So this time we're connecting virtually, and we know the phrase safe sex. Well, just think of this as safe church. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, imagine it's 4 p.m., it's Sunday, March 22nd, 2020. Picture yourself being in St. Margaret's, Cedar Cottage, that lovely space in the round. Visualize some of the people who are going to be there, and I get up to speak, and I might have a bad pun or something, but I'll just discount that for the time being. And I just want you to think of this question as you look at the trees and stuff like that. Imagine if you were going to be starting something like a music group, or a disruptive company, or doing something with a social justice issue. You want to pull together a team. Who would you want on your A team? Just think about that. Right? Probably people were more or less on the same page, right? Check. Probably people that didn't present unnecessary risk to your project. Check. And certainly not folks that might sabotage the whole thing, right? So what we want to have a look at is who Jesus chose to be part of his world-changing project. And I'm just going to read the chunk in Mark chapter 3, verses, here we are, verses 13 to 19. He went up the mountain and called to him those whom he wanted, and they came to him, and he appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, to be with him, to be sent out to proclaim the message, and to have authority to cast out demons. So he appointed 12. Here we are. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder, and Andrew, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him, right? Unlikely friendships are us. Could describe this A-team well. I'm in a park close by. There are roads, there are dogs, there are squirrels, there are people. Just enjoy it. We're doing semi-wild church speaking today. Some examples that these were friendships is a lot of the list is full of nicknames, right? Simon, he called Peter, meaning the rock. They knew each other. James and John, who gave the name Boanerges, sons of thunder, sort of hotheads. And what of that dude Thaddeus? Nothing. We know nothing about him, but there's a good hint that actually was a nickname meaning, big-hearted or warm-hearted. So that's that they were friends. They were not just a list of names that had, signed up. Some examples that these were unlikely just think of some questions for this team you're drawing together. Would you have chosen a couple of hotheads? What if they went off at the wrong time, right? For your A team, would you have chosen a tax collector, Levi, also called Matthew, one of your own folk who is working for the enemy, collecting taxes, probably a little bit more than they should? Would you have chosen Simon the Zealot? He was part of a party that existed probably for the next 50 years, interested in overthrowing the Roman occupying force. Probably not. What about Judas Iscariot, who was to betray him? Dun 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 dun. But here, Jesus did. That's the main point. Unlikely friendships are kind of embedded into the DNA, the RNA of the Jesus way from the beginning, right? We better get used to it if we choose to follow Jesus on the open way. That's the main point. Why are we talking about unlikely friendships? Not because Beth Carlson Molina came up with this cool phrase in her off time. Well, that also. But really, it's because unlikely friendships are embedded in the DNA of the way from the beginning. We better get used to it if we want to choose to follow Jesus on the open way. So why talk about unlikely friendships? And this is the second main point. They are a fail-safe way of growth personally and corporately. And how do they grow us that way? They grow us basically through the challenges that they bring, both the positive and negative, and the gifts that they offer of connection. That's my second main point, is that we talk of unlikely friendships not just because it's embedded in the DNA of the way from the beginning, but because they are one of the key ways of us growing personally and corporately, because of the challenges, and both positive and negative, and the gifts that they offer. Unlikely friendships are challenge and gift. Anyway, and I just want to illustrate this as we're on the abbreviated COVID way by telling two stories. And the first story illustrates the challenges, both positive and negative, that unlikely friendships offer. For about 8 years, I would drive up to Mission, BC from Vancouver about twice a month to visit a prisoner. First at the Mission Medium Security Prison and later Ferndale Minimum Security Institution. This prisoner had been convicted of murder and had had the conviction upheld on appeal, which means, there's a good chance it actually happened. And so you can imagine, let me just sketch out some of the negative challenges. First off, spending time in a busy season in my life, 3 young kids, making the trek out to Mission. It's about, 100-kilometer drive, a couple of hours of commuting, roughly twice a month, right? Negative challenge also is being in a prison. I don't know if you've been in one. Just visiting, of course, but one of the sounds of prison, you might have heard it on films that you watch, where you go through doors that are electronically, magnetically controlled, and you go in and there's a clang, then you're on your own, and then the other door opens. Not happy times. And then, of course, you're being in close quarters often with a bunch of people that you think, wow, if something went sideways, my goodness, I don't know what would happen here. Just a few moments I had like that. But I could go on about that, but what are some of the positive challenges? Challenges to my growth, right? What do I think about prison? What's this business of punishment, safety, rehabilitation, restorative justice? What did I really think about that? Could I be in a friendship with a person who denied doing the crime, but on balance, I probably think they did? Could I actually do that? Could I see them really as a person made in God's image, beloved by God? What are my limits on forgiveness? I could go on. Let me just say, I would never trade this unlikely friendship with all its challenges, because it brought me so many gifts. One example that stands out, it's just a small example. On one prison open house, it's not a joke, they'd have in the minimum security in Ferndale, they'd have an open house where people were invited in to meet with prisoners who might live on their pod. They'd have to have some connection there. I was there visiting my friend with, of course, the people, his inmate, that's in minimum security, and there was this young lady. She'd come. I could tell it was her first time in any kind of institution like this. She was uptight. She'd come with her uncle or someone who had a connection to institutions like this, but she'd come because her life had been marked by some horrendous violence. I don't know what it was, but she decided she actually wanted to come inside a prison and see the kind of people who did that to her life. And I got to see her. We just had a chance to meet with the fellow prisoners in a group, shake hands with a prisoner, a very powerful moment for her, and to witness her encounter with the fact this isn't just a prisoner, this is actually a fellow human being. And I think I got to see her for the very first time, see a prisoner as a person. And I call that a lovely challenge, but what a gift, what a holy moment. The second story illustrates the gift of perspective and intimate connection that unlikely friendships bring. I'm looking around because some neighbors are going by. They might want to sabotage my recording with a little visit. Anyway, you might be put off by my long, unlikely friendship story, and you say, that's not for me. That's just way out of my comfort zone. But I want to encourage you with this other story that we can bring this unlikely friendship posture into one-time encounters too. And here's the story. I just happened to see the company name on someone's work jacket, which reminded me of it. 1,000,000 years ago, I was in a standby lineup, which is where they wouldn't have enough seats on the plane to get home for Christmas to Kelowna from Vancouver. And there was in the lineup, there was a man, sort of my age now, in a rumpled kind of suit. I thought, it's probably a sales guy. He seemed a little too jovial. He'd probably been drinking in the bar. We were in the lineup together, and I started chatting, as I sometimes do. And he said his company had chartered planes like this, and here he was lining up just to get a single seat. And I thought, we all have good bullshit detectors. I thought, this guy is BSing me. But no matter, we were in the lineup, we chatted, and as luck, or I would, in retrospect, say as God would have it, we both got on the flight, and surprise, surprise, we ended up sitting right next to each other. And that next 30 minutes, we had amazing connection. It was a real gift. The fact that his company had chartered airplanes, true, no BS. And he showed me, and it was Christmas time, he showed me his bonus check. Now, this is the 70s, folks. His bonus check, I looked at it. It was for over $100,000, right? This was the rich business white guy. And he talked of his marriage very candidly, wondered whether it was going to last. You get the idea. In about an hour, this unlikely friendship had gifted me with perspective. Least of it, right? Rich businessmen are actually people too. And we had this intimate connection. He's probably not still alive, but that's an unlikely friendship in just a one-shot encounter. So, bottom line, what I'm making the point is, unlikely friendships are not just this cool phrase, but they are the way to go. They're embedded in our DNA if we are on the open way with Jesus. And if we're on that way, they are really the only way to go. And as we travel this COVID-19 way, I don't know how it's going to turn out, let's stay awake to the possibility of unlikely friendships. Because if we do, we will receive both the challenges, the positive and the negative challenges that will help us grow, and they will bring gifts to us that we would never have imagined, right? So glory be to God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. and the crows have echoed their amen.